Previously on Redbeard Hobbies. We painted the first unit for our new cult, the Beekeepers of Bhirr. These mysterious hooded figures have a psychic link that keeps them connected to the hive, and to this strange mass of eyes they carry with them into battle. In today's video, we'll be adding the next unit to the hive, a powerful bee rider that will run as a lump with the new cult relic, Matriarch's Barb, giving it the fly special rule. So I've got this bee knight from Reaperbones 6 that I wasn't sure what to do with until I started this cult. I'm just gluing his weapon and shield on, and then gluing him into his saddle on the big bee. I sort of considered painting the rider and big bee separately, but I usually don't bother with painting and sub-assembly. If it's part of the model that's hard to get to, it's usually pretty obscured anyway. The bee rider comes on a flight stand that we're going to try our best to sort of camouflage later on. I didn't want to just use the model as is, so I'm going to be adding a few little things with green stuff. After my last video, I got some absolutely awesome comments with lots of support and some good tips. One tip was to use parchment paper to roll out green stuff because it doesn't stick to it as much. This will help when I'm removing my green stuff parts later on. I'm rolling out a sheet that will eventually roll up to be a bedroll, but we need to let it harden for a bit. Another thing I want to add is a little pommel in the shape of a honeycomb. I'm rolling out a little ball, then shaping it with the silicone sculpting tool by pushing against the sides of it on 6 sides, trying to form kind of a hexagonal shape. Then I'm poking holes into the top of it to form the wells of the honeycomb. I probably should have let the piece fully cure before attaching it to the bee, because I lost a little bit of my work when transferring it and pushing it in place. Not a huge deal though, it just meant I had to rework it while it was in place on the bee. Now that the green stuff sheet is hardened a bit, I'm cutting it into a rectangular sheet with my hobby knife, pulling it off the parchment, then rolling it up just as if it was a real bedroll. It still hasn't fully cured, so to get it to adhere to the model, I can just kind of jam it on the back of the bee very daintily. I'm trying my best to smooth out my fingerprints with a silicone sculpting tool. I have an idea for the base that has me pretty excited. To start, I'm just cutting out a square piece of plastic card, trimming up the sides of the card, and then gluing the big bee's flight stand to it. Then I'm going to gather up some of these little bees that will join our big bee rider, and a paperclip. I'm drilling a hole in the bottom of each bee. Then I'm drilling a hole in the flight stand kind of at an angle, so that it's pointing outwards towards the edge of the base. After that, I'm cutting out a few smaller pieces of paper clips using my pliers, and using super glue to glue it into the base. Then finally, I'll be adding some glue to the tip of the paperclip piece and gluing the bee into place. The idea is that we'll have all these smaller bees flying around underneath the big bee. Later on, when we finish fully assembling the base, I'll be adding some flowers underneath the bees to make it look like they're gathering nectar, and hopefully that will mostly obscure the wires and flight stand. Oh yeah, and I'd love to hear some bee names for these little guys from all of you lovely people down in the comments. I'll try to run a poll or something with all the name suggestions I get. Next up, we're going to be making my usual texture paste: sand, Mod Podge, and paint. This time the mix was a little too watery, so I added a bit more sand to the mix. This is kind of the downside of making your own texture paste. If you kind of just wing it like me, you don't always end up with the perfect mix. This batch ended up just a little bit different than my last batch, probably because I used more paint this time around. Not a huge problem, just something to keep in consideration when you're planning your own projects. Alright, time to prime this bad boy up and get ready for painting. I'm keeping things pretty simple and trying to keep the palette similar to the other beekeepers. Although this guy is a knight, so things will get a little colorful later on. First, I'm doing an all-over base coat with mahogany, just to give everything a little bit of a warmer tone in the shadows. The bees are getting painted the same way that they were in my last video. We're doing alternate bands of yellow and black, starting from black on their heads and finishing with black near the stinger. This yellow ochre is the perfect sort of desaturated yellow. The black I'm using is coal black from Pro Acryl. These days I basically default to Pro Acryl paint for almost every color, although for some things I still pull out Vallejo or Citadel paints. Let me know in the comments what your favorite paint range is. I'm always curious to try other ranges out, and it's been a while since I've tried anything new. For the bedroll, I'm using ivory to base coat, and I think I might need 2 layers this time around. I know that everyone recommends 2 thin coats, but really it depends on the situation. You should always be thinning your paints, that's not in question, but sometimes the paint is good enough to give you coverage even when thinned. Paint ranges these days are really frickin' good, and I really only find myself having to use 2 coats when it's like white over a dark color or yellow or something really tricky like that. The light umber on the shield and bag, for instance. 1 thin coat is more than enough to cover it. Even the ivory over this light umber for the raised symbol on the shield, that went on in 1 coat. I'm gonna try something a little fun on the
It's called a lance. Hello?
Thanks, Watt. Anyway, I'm gonna try some pinstripes on the lance. I'm doing my best to space red lines evenly across the lance. Okay, it just sounds ridiculous to hear me saying it that way. I have to use the American pronunciation. Lance. I'm only doing the top section to start so I can get the spacing correct, and then I'll start working on getting it to wrap around after that. The idea also is to have a little bit of a diagonal angle to the lines to hint at the bands wrapping around it. For the honeycomb, I'm starting with that light umber as well. For the highlight color, I'm mixing together ivory, yellow ochre, and the light umber to make a highlight color that has a little hint of yellow to it. For all the wings, I'm base coating with my favorite color, dark gray blue. I think I use this paint on every single project. If you go back to my very first YouTube video, I'm using this paint for the coats on my crow grogs. But these wings went through a bit of a journey. So I started with my favorite color, dark gray blue, then I highlighted with some faded ultramarine. I used this all over the wings, not really leaving too much of the dark gray blue, and then I even mixed in some ivory with that faded ultramarine to highlight the raised areas of the wings. Maybe the correct name is the membranes, I don't know. Later on, I used blue contrast paint all over the wings, and in retrospect, I probably should have just used it within the membranes and left the raised areas untouched. I wound up coming back and repainting the raised areas, and I did wind up very happy with the contrast between the membranes and the veins of the wings, but it was a little more work than I needed to achieve that. Now for the head, I'm going with jade, which should stand out to you. All my other bees have black heads, so why is this guy different? Well, it's because this knight is a parasite. Well, not exactly a parasite, but I mean, he ain't no bee. He's a different species that's infiltrated the hive, an occurrence that frequently happens in nature, although generally it's just the young of the parasite species that they trick the bees into feeding and raising. But the root apocalypse has resulted in many strange creatures, and this little guy really wanted to be part of the hive, so he's been working very hard to fit in, despite being a different species and therefore not being fully incorporated into the psychic network that everyone else is linked up to. So why does the queen allow him to be part of our hive? Well, she sees how powerful he is. I mean, this guy kicks some major ass. Have you seen the lump's rules? So she graciously overlooks his genetic quirks, and in return, he slays her enemies for the sake of the hive. The eyes are getting painted coal black, and we have some plans to make it even blacker later on.
Blacker than the blackest black, times infinity.
For the black parts like the head and mandibles and stuff, I'm highlighting with a light neutral gray. I'm not really trying to do anything fancy here, and I'm not really blending the neutral gray into the black. It's sort of more like facial markings rather than a lighting effect. It's grime time. Streaking grime time, to be precise. I'm basically adding this as an all-over wash, coating every part of the model with it. To keep myself safe here, I'm wearing a filtered mask, and I have a window open with an air purifier going. I probably should be wearing gloves too, because this stuff can be a skin irritant, but I'm a bit of a maverick, what can I say? Once the model has been coated, we're going to leave it to sit for a couple of hours to give the grime time to affix to the model and dry. Now that it's finished drying, I'm using some Turnip28 on a makeup sponge to wipe away some of that grime from before. This creates a really effective grime effect in the recesses and lower parts of the model, and kind of gives you effortless transitions and blends. It's a really useful effect, and we used it previously on the other members of the hive. For safety, I'm wearing gloves here because, again, Turnip28 is a skin irritant. Like I said earlier, I'm not always great at following absolutely every safety guideline, but you should always be reading your warning labels and following the best safety practices. We're adding some green flocking to the base by dabbing some Mod Podge here and there on the base and then shaking some flocking onto it. Just leave that to dry for a bit, then we're tapping off the excess flocking. Finally, we're getting back to those eyes. I want to make them glossy, so I'm using Nuln Oil to wash them. The grime gave everything else on the model a matte finish, so by applying the Nuln Oil, which has more of a glossy finish to it, it'll make the eyes stand out a bit more and appear to be slightly reflective, the way an insect's eyes are. Alright, now it's time to start our scouting mission. We need to find more flowers for the queen. Mission complete. Our scouts have discovered a meadow with flowers, so we can add these flower tufts to our base. I'm adding them copiously to the base and hiding as much of the wires and flight stand as I can. We'll also bring the rest of the hive up to the meadow to help with gathering pollen and nectar, so it's time to add some flower tufts to their base too. And with that, we've completed another unit for the hive. I'm excited to try out a lump with the fly rule in-game. Lumps were already very powerful in my experience, so the idea of being able to move faster and without being impeded as much makes me think this could be pretty good. It's true that it doesn't synergize with the rest of the cult's rules though, so the last couple of units will probably be more gunline units that can take advantage of the cult's crazy shooting rules. But if you enjoyed the video, I hope you'll give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more turnip content in the future. I've been having a lot of fun getting back into this game, so I have plans for more tutorials while we finish up our hive, and hopefully a narrative battle report as well. We'll see how it goes. I've never done one, and I've been curious to try one out. We did fly over a little town on our way to settle this meadow, and I have a feeling the residents of Pumpkin Town might not take kindly to these hooded cultists settling so close. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing ya.